You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the former Conservative special advisor, Salma Shah. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the latest blows in the US-China trade war, the pausing of Trump's tariffs on everyone else, and the subsequent Wall Street stocks rebound, a top story in the Financial Times. The headline, stocks soar as Trump presses tariffs pause button and hits China harder. This is The Guardian. Trump pauses global trade war but hits China with 125% tariffs. The Telegraph describes Mr. Trump as having blinked first in his trade war. Trump blinks. That's also the way the Mail puts it. The Eye too describes Mr. Trump as having backed down in the global tariffs war. The Times says he's put the brakes on for 90 days, at least as far as tariffs on every other country is concerned. The Metro says that by his latest hiking tariffs, President Trump is risking what the paper calls the Great Mall of China. While Kevin's paper, The Mirror, calls it a gamble with the headline, Great War of China. The Express speaks to Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch, who urges the Prime Minister to make the most of Brexit. And finally, The Star leads with a study which says we Brits only have 8 mates, and just 4 of those we count as close friends. Not quite sure why that's on the front page, but anyway, tonight we're joined by Kevin and Salma to take us through the other newspapers and the one story in town. This pause, 90-day pause that came from nowhere.
Well, did it come from nowhere? Because obviously we've seen a huge market reaction to the tariffs, where people were slapping each other's backs in the Rose Garden in, the White House.
But I say nowhere because he was saying absolutely they
the
wouldn't
exact opposite. But so what's happened? So what's
pause.
happened in between? And this is really about what's been the market reaction and actually the reaction from people that have been Trump supporters on Wall Street, the reaction from people, in Trump's base, or what would be described as Trump's base, worried about consumer prices going up as a result of tariffs, and the sort of threat of recession in the US, sort of now casting a shadow over Trump's presidency. And let's not forget that his sort of claim to fame has always been about how he, managed the economy so brilliantly in his last term. So for this to come back, I think there is an obvious answer as to why there's been a bit of a wobble and why people are talking about him blinking in this situation.
A quote here from Carl Shimoda, chief market strategist, called Trump's climb down a clear-cut capitulation in response to pressure from markets and financial backers, adding the Trump administration has had its knuckles rapped by the financial markets.
Ouch, that'll hurt him because he's got a giant ego and he always tries to make everything a success for him when it's not. This clearly isn't. Now, the Financial Times calculates that the U-turn, the retreat, the climb down, the blinking, whatever we want to call it, share prices went up about 3 trillion, but they were down 5.4 trillion, according to the calculations in the FT. So they're still a long way down, but they've come back up. But it's how much political capital has he spent and wasted on this. He was forced to do it, and it is a humiliation. I love watching the press conference on Sky earlier when he was with racing car drivers and all just trying to be pally. Then he's answering the questions and he's trying to make it sound like this was a great plan. No, it's not. It's the panic, and the panic is from people turning on him. And he lives and dies by the stock market. He's obsessed with it. He's watching it all the time. He watches all the shows on it, and it was giving him a huge
crashing, he was saying that
down.
Don't worry about the markets, don't pay much attention to the markets when they were going.
Yeah,
down.
well, we woke this morning. He's with him saying, "Oh God, countries are queued up to kiss his bottom," and wanting deals. And in fact, actually, I've got to be careful of my language. He's done himself in here, hasn't he? I mean, it is going forward. He is not going to be as commanding. There's just no way. This will live long in the memory. rather like Black Wednesday did in different circumstances in Britain in 1992, or Liz Truss did in 2020.
You say that about Trump, but he has this ability, not dissimilar to Boris Johnson, this ability to bounce back. I mean, nobody thought that after the events of January 6th, that there would be any way that Trump could come back as a Republican nominee. And even when you look at the press conference that we were watching on Sky earlier, you do see that he's trying to claim credit for this rally in the stocks, as if the tariffs weren't a consequence of this. Yeah. So, and yet, Kevin, even you've admitted previously to me that you think Trump is a great political communicator. So there might be ways of going around that.
But even a rubber ball eventually loses its bounce. And it's self-inflicted.
Yeah.
Interestingly, this morning, one of our US correspondents was saying that Trump posted on social media, now is the time to buy stocks. So it seems as if he had a plan and knew perhaps what he was going to do.
Yeah, maybe. But I think that, yes, there might have been some reaction.
Every crisis is an opportunity.
Exactly. But I think that the ego point is well made in terms of the fact that these are not the headlines that he would have wanted to see. And let's see how the reaction goes in the US. I mean, this is obviously what's happening in the UK. But to Kevin's point, as to kind of like, has he lost his mastery? That might be evident in the way that other foreign leaders start to treat him as a result of the tariffs and the climb down. He's not this great figure anymore that everybody is essentially afraid of. There are ways of actually working around him, and I think that might be the break in the way that the rest of us respond to the US.
Although he has put on that 90-day pause and tariffs have gone down to the base of 10%, so they will not want to escalate from that position.
If you can hear church bells or whatever you like as an indication of something good, we mustn't forget that that 10% is still there. There is the 25% on cars. There is on steel, and also there's this great trade war with China coming.
Which brings us up to the front of the Mirror. Great War of China, the headline there, that 125% still in existence. He says that China want to do a deal, they just don't know how they can go about it.
Says the man who doesn't really know how to do a deal himself, as he's just demonstrated. But yeah, when you've got China and the US, 40-50% of the world's trade, I mean, absolutely huge. So there'll still be an impact globally, even if he just cancelled all tariffs on everybody else if there is this battle. But those tariffs, 125% tariff, if you're a consumer in the US, you're going to be hit really hard by inflation because so much is bought from China. Your iPhone is made in China. Yeah. Research and design is in the US, the high end, all the marketing, but it's made in China. The price of that is going to soar. So many toys, so many other goods you have. It's not going to be good in the short term for US consumers. I'm not sure it will be in the long term, because you saw the battle with Elon Musk. Whatever you think of Elon Musk, he has run so far a successful car company, but he's just described as an assembler because every bit of his cars aren't made in the US. Well, that's how the car market works. You don't get every little fixture and fitting made in your own country. You import it, and all those imports from China, well, that's going to hit the American consumer. And he made improving the standard of living, reducing the cost of living, a cornerstone of his campaign. In fact, it was more important than the migration issue. And yet, he's going to push up prices for Americans.
And Salma, looking at some of the other papers, the Mail also concentrating on that, doubling down on China. They say that they're in it for the long haul. They're not going to back down. They're going to go ahead with this fight, and it seems as if it's just going to be tit for tat. Who's going to blink first? We're suggesting that Trump has, but not with China.
No, he hasn't with China, and I think this speaks to the bigger issue that we've got in terms of where the US is having its existential crisis about being the only big global player in the world, and has been for the last sort of 100 years or so, thereabouts, in terms of its influence. And the fact that we are now, lots of people will tell you, people who are in the kind of like geopolitical space, that we're now moving to this multipolar world. So what does this actually tell us? Is that threat, that worry about China still exists, and that is ultimately the strategic aim here. The tariffs everywhere else, even though he said in his press conference, we've been treated badly, and I take that, but I don't want to sort of do other people down, I just want to put America first. That's true for everyone else, but China has this special status, I think, not just with Trump, but with the US more generally, about how their power is perhaps ceding to another global force.
It's the only challenger really now to the US, China, which is the world's emerging superpower. But the Mail, a lot of its columnists were very encouraging, optimistic about Trump becoming president. You read Andrew Neil, for instance, has written about Ukraine and the betrayal of Ukraine and his disappointment, and he kind of ignored signs also on the economics of it. And that, for what this matters, and the Mail's a right-wing British tabloid, it's the right in control in the US, that is very negative. Trump will absolutely hate
Yes, of
that.
course he will. And all the headlines
if he sees it.
He's had a brake turn, a U-turn, yes, a blinked first as well. Kevin and Salma, for the moment, thank you. We're going to take a break. Coming up, there have been many debates over whether mobile phones should be banned in schools, but it seems the schools themselves may be one step ahead. We'll be discussing that next.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now. It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon. Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then.
There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits coming in still.
We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded.
This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa! Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
The Premier League run-in is live on NBC and Peacock with the final sprint for European qualification.
That is massive!
Saturday, it's North versus West in a London showdown. Arsenal secured bragging rights in the first meeting.
Superstar for Arsenal.
But Brentford are looking to make European history. This is the Premier League run-in, live on NBC and streaming on Peacock.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, Kevin and Salma, to take us through the rest of the papers. Going to start with The Guardian in this section, and this story about mobile phones being banned in nearly every school in England. But this is a voluntary move by the schools themselves. Salma.
Yeah, and this is really interesting because it's always been this big bone of contention for lots of politicians about how you should deal with smartphones. And there was very recently an attempt with a private member's bill to try and officially ban smartphones in schools through legislation or put an age limit on them. So Rachel D'Souza, who is the Children's Commissioner, commissioned this survey of 15,000 schools, and it turns out the vast majority, in the 90%, actually already have this ban and enforce this ban. So for me, the question is whether you actually need to make it law, but the General Secretary of the National Education Union seems to think that it should be something that should be a statutory ban, therefore put into law. But I think this sort of, for me at least, I don't know what you think, but proves that perhaps we don't need it.
Do you think it should be made law?
No, I'd leave it up to schools and their acting. I'd leave it to heads. I see there is a case for national action sometimes if it's not been taken locally, and there is a problem, but I can't see where the problem is. I'm slightly surprised, according to this, 0.2% of primary schools don't have a policy, or 10% of secondary. I just wonder if they didn't fill in the questionnaire properly, because I've not come across now, as a parent or talking to other parents of a school where it doesn't have a policy. They're all slightly different. Yeah. Sometimes you're allowed to keep them off in your bag. Sometimes you have to put them in a locker. Sometimes you've got to hand them in at the beginning of a lesson, pick them up at the end. It all varies, but leave it to heads and schools. I am.
But maybe a law would bring a certain amount of uniformity, though.
Yeah,
if each school is left to its own discretion.
All right. Will the uniformity be the correct uniformity? Exactly. And I'm just slightly surprised at the National Education Union going down this line. They normally oppose such measures, such uniform bans, saying leave it to let teachers teach and so on. And Gillian Keegan, the final education secretary, I think, in the Conservative era, she was being pushed, I thought, with no enthusiasm into coming in with a national ban. Bridget Phillipson, the current education secretary, is resisting it. But I just think those figures show just leave it to individual schools. If there's a problem with an individual school, then that has to be tackled locally. We don't need to have a single one-size-fits-all policy right across all schools in England, or Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland.
I suppose if they seem to be exercising common sense themselves, then no need to interfere.
But perhaps actually we should have a ban to keep adults off their phones. I'd love a ban to put my phone somewhere in class.
That's a whole other story. We'll end in this story in the Metro Universal theme park, which will deliver an estimated 50 billion boost to the economy to open in the UK by 2031. Good news.
Well, it is good news, and, we do want those jobs. There's an estimated 28,000 jobs, but, I can't believe I'm saying this, because Kevin and I don't normally agree on a lot of things, but we do have a lot of agreement around this, which is, yes, it's great to have work, but what kind of work is that going to be, for a theme park in particular, seasonal, etc.? But also, what is the government having to do in order to make this happen? Around planning regulations, around, what housing developments might not happen in those areas, the consequence of this. So there's a lot behind the story, even though I am a big fan of all the Universal movies and probably will want to visit. But my policy brain says that there are other questions.
You'll be in the Kung Fu Panda world of awesomeness, will you? I suppose it's probably less seasonal if it's open all year round. It's in the Metro tomorrow because it has very early deadlines and it missed it today when it was in most of the papers. But I would really like that 50 billion, I think, is over 20 years. So I think all these figures are inflated. I agree on the jobs because I don't think there'll be particularly well-paid jobs in the service sector unless we get a real living wage rather than the minimum wage just going up a bit. I'd want to know how much they're shaking us down as taxpayers. The government has not said, has not revealed that. And international companies, when they're touting their parks or their wares, are very good at extracting cash. I really like Jaguar Land Rover as a company. It's Indian-owned, but it's shaken us down £500 million for a battery plant in Somerset, and another £500 million in Port Talbot Steelworks.
We must leave it there. We have run out of time. Thank you very much. Stay with us both for the top of the 11. Much more to come.